Okay, we're back here on the John Fredericks Radio Network, trucking the truth across America. Thanks for being with us. And we're here live at Radio Row at the FAIR Conference, Federation for American Immigration Reform. Joining us now live is Marc Lotter. Marc is the Strategic Communications Director for the Trump 2020 campaign. Hey, Marc, great to have you again.
It's great to be back with you, John. In person, not just on the phone.
I know, right?
I think last time we did that was, what, Florida?
Florida, right?
Yeah.
Orlando, where the president was announcing.
Nice cool breeze.
Yeah, something like that. Nice cool breeze. I remember when I set up there that morning, we were outside, and they had a kind of a makeshift tent. All the people are already online, and I remember we had to bring the portable lights or whatever to figure out how to hook things up. And one of the security guys said to me, "Hey, just word of precaution, just watch out for snakes." that about did it for me. Watch out for snakes. But we were able to do that. Marc, it's been a disastrous week for the media this week, and it's only Thursday morning so far. The fake news on the Ukrainian conversation, and then the fake news yesterday about Director of National Intelligence McGuire wanting to resign. Both the White House and McGuire himself said it was complete nonsense. I mean, how do you run with a story and not go to the source of the story and just take anonymous sources and go with it? And that's what the Washington Post did. They never waited to get a response back from the person who they said was going to resign. And when he finally got back to them in New York, he said absolutely false. And then they never ran a retraction.
I mean, the media and Democrats this week have so much egg on their face, we should send them some Trump toast. I mean, this has been, as you said, it's been a week that you cannot hardly describe. I mean, everything that we heard for a week about this transcript and this so-called phone call turned out to be fake news. There was no quid pro quo. There was no 8 mentions of Joe Biden. There was no pressure applied. I mean, every bit of that story, and yet and the shocking part is that it didn't stop Nancy Pelosi from marching, and Thelma and Louise must have joined the squad, because they're now going to march off this impeachment cliff, and they announced and decided they were doing it before they even had the facts. She stood there, I think it was yesterday, and admitted, while she hadn't seen the transcript, but she was still going to go down this path. They're so consumed with Trump derangement syndrome that they're now preparing to march this country through this just because they don't like the president.
So what happens now, Marc?
If they decide to go down this path, I think they're going to be the ones who are held accountable in 2020. I mean, it's going to fail. There's no way. I mean, let's remember for a half a second and go back to when Nancy Pelosi, Jerry Nadler, Joe Biden were railing in the late 90s against the impeachment of Bill Clinton. And yet there were matters of law. Bill Clinton, even though he was not impeached and removed from office in the Senate, he lost his law license for 5 years. He was fined. He was sanctioned for lying and committing those are violations of the law. What on earth are they even accusing President Trump of that would warrant even articles of impeachment, let alone removal? So none of these things are going to hold true. And I think that the American people will hold it against them for putting us through this. And if you're one of those 35 Republicans who won districts in 2018 that the president carried in 2016, well, your name's going to appear on the same ballot as him in 2020. Our campaign, the RNC, raised $5 million in 24 hours. And absolutely, you can be sure we're going to make sure your voters in your districts know you have a record of no accomplishment. You didn't pass the USMCA, which will help American workers, farmers, ranchers, manufacturers. You played politics with impeachment. That is your legacy, and have fun running on it. I welcome it.
So you're pretty confident that a lot of these Democrats, the 7 moderate so-called independent-thinking Democrats that signed the op-ed in the Washington Post on, what was that, on Sunday?
I think something like that. Yeah.
On Monday, before any of this came out, before the truth came out, said they were going forward with impeachment. 2 of them in Virginia, as you know, Abigail Spanberg in the 7th District and Elaine Lurie in the 2nd, both of them vulnerable, both of them in Trump districts. There were another 5 of them across the country. They don't have time to pass USMCA, which would aid their constituents, but they have time to write an op-ed saying they're going to go forward with impeachment. They've accomplished nothing, and they're running in Trump districts with him on the ballot.
Yeah, I mean, those are going to be the facts, and they can defend that record. And, I heard a lot mentioned that this is the first president who is going to potentially face at least an impeachment inquiry before his election. So Richard Nixon and Bill Clinton were already into their second terms when this happened to them, and they were wondering the impact. And I'm like, well, you have to remember that our campaign has a war room. We are fully staffed and operating. This is not a thing where just the White House and the official channels. If that's where they want to go, then we will be prepared to fully use our resources to support this president. Remind the American people why they elected this man, the promises that he made and the promises he's delivered, and obviously we've got record-setting resources and we've got a lot of in infrastructure on the ground ready to go. That if they do this, and I think it's still a disservice to America if they do it, and I would rather not have to go through that myself. But if that's where they want to take us, then you can absolutely be sure that we're ready to go.
You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network and the John Fredericks Radio app with my co-host for the week, Martha Bonetta. Joining us live here is Marc Lotter. Marc is currently the Strategic Communications Director for Trump 2020. Prior to that, he had various assignments in the White House, the last one being with Vice President Mike Pence, and he is now with Trump 2020 in charge of strategery. Marc, let me ask you this. You alluded to your war room and the fact that you're not going to be sitting around during impeachment watching television. Describe for us, elaborate on what we can expect.
Well, and our mission won't change. Our mission is to reelect the President of the United States and the Vice President. And every day we get up and, we have a tremendous team of people that are ready to push back on fake news, ready to put out the facts, ready to put content on social media, whether it's digital videos, whether it's, I know some people said that, we had an impeachment video out within 30 minutes of Nancy Pelosi's. Well, that was made months ago or weeks ago because we knew they were going to go down this path eventually. We sit around every day and think about what can we do to highlight the successes of this president, let people know that, and you can better be sure that we're going to defend him and help our colleagues as they do the bulk of the work. We will help amplify that through our tremendous channels and make sure that the millions of people who support this president know the facts, know the truth, and have the armaments and the info to talk to their friends, their colleagues, maybe some of those folks who are in the middle, who are definitely not going to be on board with the socialist policies of the leading Democrats. But we're ready to get that information out there.
Marc, what does this do to the Joe Biden for president campaign?
This is a disaster for Joe Biden. I mean, let's remember for a minute two things. One, there was a story in Politico by a great reporter who now works for the New York Times in January of 2017, days before the inauguration, that highlighted Ukraine's efforts to meddle in the 2016 election. There were meetings with a DNC official at the Ukrainian embassy. They were working against the Trump campaign and members of the Trump campaign to get information out and all of that kind of stuff. When the president talks about the corruption and looking back, that's what he is talking about. But then we've got to answer a very simple question. And look, on the face of it, I've been in public service for more than a dozen years. You have a vice president of the United States whose son, who has no experience in Ukraine, no experience in gas, no experience in corporate governance, getting $50,000 a month from a company where his father is handling negotiations. And flash forward, he travels with his father on Air Force Two to China on an official visit, and a week and a half later, his company gets $1.5 billion investment by the Bank of China. Even the Obama State Department, according to the New York Times, had issues with those business dealings. John Kerry's stepson, who was Hunter Biden's business partner, raised issues about those dealings in the Ukraine and China. They don't talk about that. They want to make the fact that the president is actually calling out this corruption. That's his problem. But nobody wants to look at Joe Biden. It's going to be looked at.
When will a Democratic rival pick up on this, Mark?
It'll be interesting because they are so married to the radical left, and they are so under the control of the squad and those radicals that they would probably risk, their own election prospects. I mean, let's go back to that debate on the stage in Detroit about a month ago. I was there, and you had Tim Ryan and a couple of others, I can't remember who it was, on that stage, people who had no chance of winning the nomination, telling the leaders in the polls that their policies had no chance of winning, that they were going to be beat in a general election.
Yeah, Delaney said the same thing.
Right, yes. That's what they're looking at. The only people who have any sense to say you're marching us off a liberal socialist cliff and you're going to get beat to Donald Trump are the ones who have no chance facing him.
They're under 1%.
They didn't even make the debate stage last time, let alone in these next couple of debates.
Right. Unbelievable.
Mark, I have a question. We're seeing so much irresponsible journalism. I mean, there's no respect for journalism because of what we're seeing with all of the fake news. And you have news outlets, what they said here, so many outlets were editing out 500 words of the Trump-Ukraine transcript. I mean, the American people, they're seeing this unfold before them, and there are many voters that just they're inundated with all of this fake news. Blaze. I mean, there's just so much happening now. The American people are getting all of this fake. What do you tell the American voters that are being inundated with all of this outrageous spin that's coming from the left? They hate the president more than they love our country.
This is the thing that makes me the most hopeful. Is that we do have the ability now. And look, I was in the media in the late 90s when the Clinton impeachment was coming. Your only choices at the time were the major news outlets. I mean, still CNN. I think Fox News was in its infancy, and MSNBC didn't even exist yet. We now have not only all of those outlets to fight against, but we actually have outlets out there that are going to make sure people know the truth. And we have more information flooding into our phones right now than people back then ever did. And so, but that's why I think the power of our campaign and the social media and the ability to get facts out to the people directly is so important. And it will happen from the White House, it will happen from our campaign, and there'll be many outlets out there that will fight this narrative and fight this fake news reporting that we have seen so much. And in that sense, that is a good thing for us. It's going to be the only way we get the information out there. It's unfortunately still that we're going to have to go through it.
Mark, final question. Although we have a national audience, I live in Virginia. And so the Republican Party of Virginia right now is not doing very well. Doesn't really exist. It's a postal permit, as you know, masquerading as an organization. They have to borrow money to meet payroll. Kirk Cox is bailing them out. He's the speaker. Are we going to be competitive in Virginia, and are you guys going to do anything to help?
Well, we're absolutely going to.
Is that? Can I ask that?
You can ask that. So we are going to compete in every single state where we believe that there's an opportunity for the president to win. We are already investing resources in New Hampshire, in Maine. I was in Minnesota 2 weekends ago where the president nearly won. The president was in New Mexico last week. We're even making investments in Colorado and places like Oregon. When the data says that we need to be there and we can play a role, we will be playing a role. If there is an opportunity for us, even if we don't necessarily win a state, that if we can help shape congressional races, then we're going to be there. I was just up in Massachusetts just earlier this week speaking to Republicans because there's a chance we could flip some seats back in Massachusetts in 2020. So we're going to do all of those things. I'm sure. I mean, Virginia is always thought of as, well, it's now very blue. But you've got to wonder, because of the scandals that plagued the Democrats in the state of Virginia, because you're going to have members who are in those Trump districts that are now going to be going for impeachment, that there should be an opportunity for us to do that. And if we can help, we'll definitely be there to do it.
Well, thank you. Marc Lotter, we're out of time. I want to really thank you for being with us today. Marc Lotter, the Strategic Communications Director, Trump 2020. Always a pleasure to have you on, Marc.
Great to see you in person.
Thank you.
Marc.